Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive with us.
Yeah, great to be here.
So today we're going all the way back to 1981 for a look at Dragonslayer.
Ooh, a classic.
Absolutely, and we've got some pretty awesome material to work with here.
Yeah, we do.
Tons of background info on the production and its impact on fantasy cinema.
Plus, we got to talk about that dragon.
Right. Vermithrax pejorative
Such an iconic name.
for a truly iconic dragon.
One of the things that always strikes me about Dragonslayer is how it completely redefined what was possible with special effects in fantasy
Well,
film.
yeah, for sure, especially for that time period.
Totally. I mean, even today, those effects hold up incredibly well.
They really do. It's kind of mind-blowing to think they pulled it off without all the,
His CGI.
the CGI wizardry that we have now.
Exactly. And speaking of mind-blowing Vermithrax pejorative, that dragon.
Oh, he is.
He is a true icon in fantasy cinema.
Absolutely. He's in a league of his own.
They used this brilliant blend of puppetry and stop motion animation, and then they incorporated this revolutionary technique called go motion, which added motion blur to the stop motion.
Interesting.
So Vermithrax's movements are incredibly fluid and lifelike.
Wow. I've read about that, but I never really thought about how that was actually
Yeah,
achieved.
it was a pretty big deal at the time.
I bet. And it's crazy to think about Phil Tippett, the genius behind those effects, painstakingly animating each scale and scar on that dragon.
Yeah.
You can really see the artistry and dedication in every single frame.
Oh, absolutely. And that dedication paid off big time because Dragonslayer snagged an Oscar nomination for Best Visual Effects.
It did, which is really something.
What do you think when you compare Vermithrax to the dragons you've seen in more recent films? Does that practical old school approach create a different kind of impact for you?
That is a great question. I mean, there's a certain weight and tangibility to Vermithrax that's hard to replicate with CGI.
Yeah.
It's almost like you can feel the heat of his breath and the weight of his scales as he moves.
Yeah, totally.
But, beyond the technical marvels, Dragonslayer wasn't afraid to explore a darker, grittier side of fantasy.
Yeah, that's a good point. The village and the castle have this lived in, almost grimy feel to them,
Yes.
which is so different from the romanticized medieval worlds we often see.
It's like they captured the harsh realities of medieval life.
Yeah, warts and all.
Right. And that brutal lottery system where young women are sacrificed to the dragon.
Oh my gosh, yes.
That was chilling.
So chilling. And it really makes you confront the dark side of human nature, right?
For sure.
The villagers are so desperate to survive, they're willing to sacrifice their own children to appease this monster.
It's crazy.
It really makes you think about the lengths people will go to when they're faced with unimaginable fear
Yeah.
and the choices they make in the name of survival.
You can really feel that desperation throughout the whole film.
Yes, you can. And then you have this overarching theme of magic fading, which adds another layer of complexity.
It does.
You see this struggle between the old ways like Ulrich and Galen represent, and then the new order where power lies in politics and religion.
Right.
It's almost like Dragonslayer is predicting this shift from a world dominated by myth and legend to one that's governed by human institutions.
It's like watching a world on the brink of change, unsure of what the future holds, and that uncertainty just seeps into the lives of every character.
Absolutely.
And then we're introduced to Galen, the sorcerer's apprentice.
Right.
He's basically thrown into the deep end.
Yeah, he is.
He's barely learned to spell, and now he's expected to take down this legendary dragon.
Yeah, no pressure.
Right, it's no wonder he's terrified.
And I heard that Peter MacNicol, the actor who played Galen, he was actually terrified of heights in real life.
Oh, wow.
So can you imagine filming those scenes where he's scaling cliffs and climbing through the dragon's lair?
Oh, my goodness, that is amazing.
Yeah, talk about dedication.
Right. And then we have Valerian, the blacksmith's daughter,
Yes, Valerian.
who is a total badass.
She is.
She disguises herself as a man to avoid the lottery and fight for her survival.
Yeah, and that adds this really powerful feminist angle to the film.
Oh, it does for sure. She's such a strong, independent character.
Totally.
A true inspiration.
She is.
It's fascinating how Dragonslayer weaves these complex characters, each with their own internal struggles, into this larger narrative of a world in turmoil.
Yeah, I love how they did that.
And speaking of, interesting things that they did, I have to bring up the co-production between Paramount and Disney,
Oh, yeah.
which is kind of wild when you think about it.
It is, especially since this was before Disney had fully embraced that family-friendly image.
Exactly. It's surprising to think that Disney was involved in a film with such mature themes and a dark tone.
It really speaks to the willingness of both studios to take a risk on a film that pushed the boundaries of what was considered acceptable for a fantasy film back then.
It seems like Dragonslayer was challenging conventions right from the start.
Oh, for sure. It wasn't afraid to explore those darker corners of human experience and the complexities of a world on the cusp of change.
Absolutely. And, we've only just scratched the surface of what makes this film so fascinating.
Yeah.
There's so much more to unpack. So stick with us as we dive even deeper into Dragonslayer.
It's pretty amazing how they managed to create such a believable and terrifying dragon with, like, just practical effects.
It really is.
Especially back then with the technology they had.
Right. It wasn't just about moving the creature around. It was about capturing that raw primal power,
Yeah,
you know?
totally.
And I read that they actually used real fire and pyrotechnics for those scenes in the Dragon's Lair.
Oh, yeah, for sure. They did. It wasn't just movie magic. They were working with real heat, real danger.
Wow.
I think that translates to the screen. It adds to the intensity and visceral nature of the film.
Oh, for sure.
Like, you really feel like you're right there with Galen facing the dragon's fiery breath.
Yeah, you really do. And
Yeah.
there were no green screens or motion capture suits or anything back then. So you get this sense that the actors are truly reacting to this monstrous creature in front of them.
Yeah, definitely. And that commitment to realism goes beyond the dragon, too.
It does.
The characters in Dragonslayer, they feel so grounded and relatable, even with all the crazy, fantastical elements.
Besides that too.
They weren't just like those cookie-cutter heroes and villains you see so often.
Right.
They were complex individuals, they had flaws and fears and motivations that felt really real.
Like Galen the apprentice.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
not like, some fearless warrior.
Right.
He's a young guy thrown into this situation that he's totally unprepared for.
Uh-huh.
So you see him wrestle with doubt, make mistakes, and ultimately grow from those experiences.
Yeah.
And it makes him so much more relatable as a hero.
Totally. I think a lot of us can identify with that feeling of being in over our heads and facing these impossible challenges.
Oh, yeah.
And then you have Valerian,
Oh,
who, totally defies expectations,
she does.
takes control of her own destiny.
Doesn't wait for a prince to come and save her.
No way she's disguising herself as a man to fight for her survival, protect her community.
That's what makes her so compelling.
Uh-huh.
She's brave, resourceful, and challenges those traditional gender roles,
Yeah,
which was pretty groundbreaking for the time.
absolutely.
I think the dynamic between Galen and Valerian is really interesting, too.
Yeah? How so?
Well, they come from such different backgrounds, but they're united by this shared threat and this common goal.
Right. It's the classic bringing together of two unlikely heroes.
Exactly.
And their relationship is like a testament to the power of human connection,
It is.
even in the face of danger and adversity.
They learn to trust each other,
Yeah.
support each other, and ultimately find strength in their shared struggle.
It adds a layer of emotional depth to the film, for sure.
Right.
Even in this world filled with dragons and sorcery,
Yeah.
it's the human connections that truly matter.
And then there's that ending,
Oh, yeah.
which is anything but typical for your average fantasy film.
Definitely no triumphant fanfare
Yeah,
or
boom.
clear-cut victory.
Right. You're kind of left with this sense of ambiguity,
Yeah.
of wondering what happens next.
It's not a simple good defeats evil and everyone lives happily ever after.
Not at all.
It's a lot more nuanced than that.
Right.
It reflects the complexities of the world that these characters live in.
It's like the film acknowledges that sometimes, even after a great battle, there are no easy answers or perfect solutions.
Exactly.
There are consequences, sacrifices, and the fight for survival just continues.
Yeah, it's that realism,
Ah.
that willingness to challenge those traditional fantasy tropes
Right.
that makes Dragonslayer so thought-provoking and memorable.
For sure.
Like, it stays with you long after you've seen it.
It does.
And it makes you think about the choices the characters made
Right.
and the impact those choices had on their world.
It really encourages you to think for yourself,
Yeah.
to question assumptions and grapple with,
Yeah.
the complexities of good and evil,
Uh-huh.
heroism and sacrifice.
And I think that's why Dragonslayer has resonated with audiences for so many decades.
I agree.
It's not just a spectacle, it's a story that explores universal themes
Right.
and human experiences that transcend time.
And speaking of its enduring impact, what are your thoughts on the film's legacy, particularly in terms of, its use of practical effects?
Oh, that's a good question.
In today's CGI-dominated world, do you think there's still a place for the artistry and the tangibility of those old school techniques.
Well, CGI has definitely opened up a world of possibilities for filmmakers.
It has.
But there's a certain magic to practical effects
I agree.
that I think will always have a place in cinema.
I think so too.
There's this sense of wonder,
Yeah.
of believing what you see on screen when you know that something tangible was created and built and brought to life
I agree.
through the ingenuity and the artistry of these talented craftspeople.
Like, take Vermithrax, for example.
Yeah.
You can almost feel the weight of his scales, the heat of his breath.
Right, and that's because on some level it was real. There was a physical presence on set, something for the actors to react to.
I think it's like the difference between watching a live play and a filmed performance.
Oh, interesting.
Both can be great,
Yeah.
but there's a different energy, a sense of immediacy when you know that what you're seeing is happening right there in front of you.
Totally. It's that groundedness, that
Yeah.
sense of something real existing within the frame
Right.
that can be missing from CGI-heavy films.
And that's why I think there will always be a need for practical effects.
Yeah.
Because they offer this, unique set of tools for creating believable and immersive worlds.
They ground the fantastical in reality.
Exactly. And that could be truly captivating.
Absolutely.
And, it's about finding the right balance.
Oh, for sure.
Using both practical and digital effects
Yeah,
to create the most impactful and believable experience for the audience.
definitely.
But I think that artistry and craftsmanship behind practical effects will always have a special place in my heart.
In mine, too.
It's what brought creatures like Vermithrax to life
Yeah.
and made us believe in the magic of Dragonslayer.
Absolutely. And as we move toward the final part of our deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought.
Good.
Dragonslayer presented this idea of magic fading human institutions taking control.
Right.
How do you think that resonates in today's world, where technology and science seem to be pushing aside those traditional beliefs and ways of thinking?
That is a fascinating question to consider.
It is, isn't it?
Are we witnessing a similar shift in our own time, where the old ways are giving way to the new?
Interesting.
We'll explore that and more in the final part of our deep dive. Welcome back to the show, everyone. It's time to wrap up our deep dive into Dragonslayer.
It's been a blast.
It really has. We've talked about the amazing special effects, the complex characters, and the film's really thought-provoking themes.
Absolutely.
So as we, kind of wrap things up, I'm curious to get your final thoughts on the film's lasting impact. What is it about Dragonslayer that you think continues to resonate with audiences even after all these years?
Well, it's pretty fascinating how Dragonslayer still feels relevant today, even though it was released over 40 years ago.
I agree.
I think that's a testament to the power of storytelling and the film's ability to tap into these universal themes that transcend time.
I completely agree. It's not just a fun fantasy adventure.
Right.
It really grapples with these ideas about fear and sacrifice and the struggle for survival.
Yeah. And those are themes that will always be relevant no matter what era we're in.
Exactly. And Dragonslayer doesn't shy away from the darker aspects of those themes either.
Yeah, that's true. We see the brutality of the dragon's reign, the desperation of the villagers,
Right.
and the moral compromises that they're forced to make.
It's a reminder that even in a fantasy setting, real-world consequences exist.
Absolutely. And another thing, it's not afraid to challenge conventions. From the gritty realism of the world to that ambiguous ending, Dragonslayer subverts your expectations.
It does.
And forces you to really think critically about what you're seeing.
It doesn't offer any easy answers or neat resolutions.
No, it doesn't.
It leaves you with this lingering sense of unease.
Yeah.
Like you said, forcing you to ponder, the implications of the events and the fate of the characters.
And it's a much more thought-provoking approach than just a simple happily ever after.
I think so, too. It's a film that really stays with you.
Yeah.
And it makes you think about, what you would do in those situations.
Right. Would you be brave enough to stand up to a dragon?
Or would you succumb to that, fear and desperation?
It really encourages us to examine our own values and beliefs.
It does.
And I think that's a pretty powerful thing for a film to do.
I agree. And I think it's also important to remember that Dragonslayer was released during a time of significant global tension.
Oh, that's true.
The Cold War was at its peak.
Yeah.
There was this widespread fear of nuclear war. People were grappling with a sense of disillusionment.
And you can see those anxieties reflected in the film.
You can.
In the themes of magic fading and the rise of human-centric power structures.
Right. It's like the film is mirroring the uncertainties of that time.
Exactly.
Asking these questions about where power lies
Yeah.
and what happens when those old ways of thinking are challenged.
It's like the film is holding up a mirror to society,
It is.
reflecting back our own fears and uncertainties.
It allows us to process those emotions and maybe find some comfort in knowing that we're not alone in those feelings.
Totally, it creates a sense of connection,
Yeah.
reminding us that even in times of fear and uncertainty, we can find shared experiences through art and storytelling.
Dragonslayer manages to be both entertaining and thought-provoking,
It does.
which is a pretty rare feat.
It is.
I think it's a film that has definitely earned its place in cinematic history,
Absolutely.
and I believe it will continue to be enjoyed and discussed for, generations to come.
I wholeheartedly agree it's a film that challenges us.
Inspires us,
Yeah.
and ultimately reminds us of the power of storytelling.
Yeah. So well said. So to wrap up our deep dive into Dragonslayer, I just want to go back to something we talked about earlier.
Okay.
Those practical effects.
Yeah.
In a world that's increasingly dominated by CGI, what are your final thoughts on the role of practical effects in shaping the magic of Dragonslayer and fantasy films in general?
CRG has undoubtedly revolutionized filmmaking
Uh-huh.
and opened up all these incredible possibilities.
It has.
But I still believe that there's a certain magic and authenticity to practical effects that can never be truly replicated digitally.
I agree. There's this tangibility,
Yeah.
a sense of weight and presence
Uh-huh.
that practical effects bring to a film that I think can be really captivating.
For sure.
And in Dragonslayer, it's that commitment to practical effects, that blend of artistry and ingenuity that truly brings Vermithrax to life.
I mean, it makes him feel real, like a force to be reckoned with. You can almost feel the heat of his breath,
Right.
the weight of his scale.
And that's because there was a physical presence on set, something tangible for the actors to interact with,
Exactly.
something for the cameras to capture.
It's a reminder that sometimes the most effective way to create a sense of wonder and belief is to ground the fantastical in reality.
Absolutely.
And Dragonslayer demonstrates that beautifully.
Yeah. Maybe the key is to find the right balance,
Yeah.
Embrace the strength of both practical and digital effects
Yeah.
to create these immersive and unforgettable cinematic experiences.
Maybe someday we'll see a resurgence of practical effects, a renewed appreciation for the craftsmanship and artistry
Yeah, that would be awesome.
that brought creatures like Vermithrax pejorative to life.
I would love to see that.
But for now, I encourage everyone to revisit Dragonslayer.
Yes.
Experience its magic for yourself.
See how they blended those practical effects
Uh,
with that timeless storytelling
yeah.
to create a truly unforgettable experience?
And consider how its themes of fear, sacrifice, and the struggle for survival
Yeah,
continue to resonate in our world today.
they really do.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Dragonslayer.
It's been a pleasure.